Hi, my name is Jeff Thomas. I'm the Stewardship and Support Officer for the Diocese of St David's. And in 3 weeks' time, I retire from this role, and I've been asked to offer some reflections on the last 4 years as SASO, as we call it, the Stewardship and Support Officer. The role is to support churches and try to get them to bundle their resources in such a way that they can meet their outgoings. These are my views. They are not the official views of the DBF. This is the way I see it. Not everybody will agree with me, and that's fine. But this is very much my perspective and what I've learnt over the time. So in trying to think of a way of presenting this in a meaningful way, I thought of the 7 churches in the book of Revelation and what they teach us. It also teaches us that the problems that were there in the early days continue to bedevil us, and they are with us and need to be dealt with. So here they are, the 7 churches of Asia Minor. We have Ephesus at the top, and then centre row left to right, Samaria, Pergamon, Thyatira, bottom row Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Each one came in for some criticism in the book of Revelation, and for different reasons. And so let's take them one by one. Ephesus. Revelation 2, verse 4. You have forsaken the love you had at first. I think this manifests itself in the us and them that we come across when we talk to people out in the diocese. So they talk about the church in Wales, the church in Wales this, the church in Wales that, as if it was some other body. We are the church in Wales. The Church in Wales's constitution is our constitution. We are this body. And if we're not happy with its rules, then stand for office, get onto the appropriate committee, and flag up some kind of change. That's the way we do things. What we don't do is to just sit there and criticise. And then there's the diocese this, the diocese that, as if the diocese was something separate to us. It isn't. We are the diocese. We collectively are the Anglican Communion in this diocese, and we are collectively delivering God's mission. Not our mission, not the church's mission, but God's mission. And it's our job as practicing Christians to lend our weight to that mission wherever God is at work. And that's a matter for us to try to discern prayerfully. There's the LMA, as if the LMA was something separate. The LMA this and the LMA that. And we are the LMA. Our LMA is our LMA. We have people who sit on the LMA Council. Just deal with it. We are part of this. It is not something separate to us. We can't even come together on a 5th Sunday as a group within an LMA to celebrate one joint service. There are very few people who are prepared to travel between churches. And if we've got to the point where our faith begins and ends at the boundaries of our local church, then we've lost something. When Jesus talked about his church, he was talking about every single individual who looked to him as their saviour. Samaria. Revelation 2, verse 10. Do not be afraid of what you're about to suffer. I think this is about facing down challenge. We are pretty bad at doing that. We are servant leaders, but sometimes we allow the servant part to dominate. Christ did not relinquish his kingship, even though he was a servant king. And if we are part of the diocesan team, the leadership team, the ones who are providing ministry in the diocese, then it behoves us to get behind the diocesan direction of travel. And we need to be advocates for it. We need to sell it, and we need to challenge with love and respect those views which tend to undermine what the diocese is trying to achieve. Because what the diocese is trying to achieve is what the bishop has prayerfully discerned in consultation with people within the diocese. If the Spirit is talking through the bishop, then it behoves us to get our weight behind what we are trying to achieve as a diocese. Now, we come to issues like hearing phrases like the ministry share is unreasonable. Ministry share is unreasonable. It is neither reasonable nor unreasonable. It is what it is. It's what it costs to run the diocese over a 12-month period. They're not figures that have been plucked out of midair. These are the actual costs, and we can either pay them or we can't. And if we can't pay them, then we have to trim our coat according to our cloth. And that means fewer clergy. So if we want the clergy that we've got, we need to meet the ministry share. It's not unreasonable, it's just what it is. And if you can't pay it, let's be upfront about it. And let's just accept that we can't pay it, and we shut the door. The LMA is just another layer of bureaucracy. There are some very good examples of LMAs working well in this diocese. And what marks them out from the LMAs that are not working is the leadership that's been shown by the LMA Dean and the ministry teams there. One LMA in particular, when My Fund Accounting came in, formed a community of practice of all their treasurers, and they got together to sort out how to do My Fund Accounting, but it's broadened from that to treasurership generally. The treasurer is the only one in a communion who does the books. It's a very lonely job. Very rarely do they have someone to turn to and ask guidance on. Here was an LMA which had a community practice that they could turn to and ask for advice. It's not just another layer of bureaucracy, and if it is another layer of bureaucracy, then that is a failure of leadership, not a failure of the LMA in principle. That's a difficult message to hear, but I firmly believe it to be the case. We can only afford this many pounds, and that's all we're paying. So this is, again, a challenge we need to face down, because what they're actually doing is creating a hole in our budget. Notice I say our budget, not the DBF's budget, our budget. When I was a young student, we used to go out for an evening and we'd have a kitty. And there'd come a point during the course of the evening, we'd normally start off with £5 in the days when you could start off with £5. But normally the beer would run out when the money ran out. And the holder of the kitty would normally say, "Hey guys, kitty's running low, we need a top up." And so we would top it up. And then we would carry on with our revels, as it were. But the point is this: the kitty holder was holding our money, which he was spending on our behalf, and we were consuming the benefit of that kitty. That's what the DBF does. We pay into the kitty, and they use the kitty to pay for the ministry that we all receive. And if we are not paying our full ministry share, we're drinking somebody else's beer. We are drinking somebody else's beer. And if we're not paying the full ministry share, it's quite proper to ask, how are you going to fill the hole you have now created in our budget? So let's have another look. Pergamum. Revelation 2:16. Resist false teaching. Well, this is linked to the last point where we face down challenge. There are the strident voices in every congregation who don't like the way that the diocese is going or the decisions that have been made. Well, this is a simple one. We either support the organisation we are a part of, even if we disagree with the direction of travel, because actually, as Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. If we are going to continue squabbling over the how to do things, we're never actually going to get anything done. So we have to have a shared vision and a direction of travel. Even if we think it's not going to work, we need to give it our best shot. Because if we don't do that, everything is going to come to nothing. Sometimes you can be the voice of one calling in the wilderness. And it's difficult when a lot of people are there and are against what you're trying to argue for. Nevertheless, it is our duty as leaders and clergy to put the diocesan case and to put it based on Scripture. We come with a plan for the future, the plan for the next few years, and we have to get people on board. We can't just sit there and just allow people to voice damaging opinions without challenge. I've lost my voice. Do you know, I went to one meeting one evening where I began challenging some of these inappropriate ideas that were flying around. And they became increasingly aggressive. Rather than back down, I continued to plug the point. We got to the point of an evening where I had to be quite direct and point out where the church was going wrong. The clergyman who was there that evening didn't even do the introduction, didn't summarise at the conclusion, and never opened his mouth during the whole of the evening. That clergyman, frankly, was asleep at the wheel, because I was dealing with a congregation which had been allowed to formulate its own views over a long period of time. And I was at the bottom of a very steep hill in trying to change those views. I got absolutely no support from the clergyman involved. That is an abrogation of leadership. It is part of the problem. I lend my voice. When you hear something that you agree with, and there are the strident voices who are trying to shout it down, being silent is throwing your lot in with the strident voices. Because if you don't challenge, they're going to continue to gain traction, these ideas. And if they continue to gain traction, they are going to undermine us. Thyatira. Revelation 2:20. Servants led into false practices. This is our money. This is the church's money. This church, not the LMA's money. This is our money to spend on this church and on nothing else. It's not our money. It's not our money. It's not our money legally, and it's not our money theologically. Let's deal with the legal first. We are charities. We're either registered or we're accepted. But whichever we are a charity. And that means the money we hold is held for charitable purposes. It is held for the purposes for which it is raised. Now, a few things flow from that. First of all, we haven't got the authority to sit on it. We haven't got the authority to build up our bank account and just sit there and say, well, we've got this money, we'll keep it for the future in case something happens or whatever. We have to spend that money on the charitable purposes for which the charity was established. There comes a point in the 1984 service where we say, all things come of thee, and of thine own do we give thee. There is this idea that the money belongs to the church. The money belongs to Christ. The money belongs to Jesus. It is there to further God's mission in the world. It's not there for us to grab for the purposes of the local church building and its surroundings. When I take the plate on a Sunday and I say the prayer, all things come of thee, and of thine own do we give thee, I turn to the altar and I raise the plate and hold it there for 2 or 3 seconds, because I can point to that point in the liturgy every week where I'm saying to people, this is our offering to God. This is going on to the altar. This is being given to God. It may be going into our bank account, but we're holding it on God's behalf. What do we get for it? Now, this makes the whole thing transactional. And it's not transactional. This is not a contractual obligation where we are paying money to the DBF in return for the ministry we receive. We are gifting this money to God. We are gifting the money to God to use for God's mission. And God's mission is delivered through his people, guided by the professional clergy who are here to do the doing, because the non-stipendiaries have jobs of their own, they have things of their own to be getting on with. They can't give it the full-time commitment the professional clergy can. It's important that we realise that this is a gift to fund God's mission. It is not paying for your Sunday services as we go along. I'm not doing by fund accounting. They'll be able to see our accounts. When I first gave this presentation in Newcastle Emlyn, there was a woman walking her dog around the perimeter of the playing fields. And I pointed to her through the window and I said, that woman can walk into any church in our diocese and ask to see the accounts. Why? Because we're charities. And charity law says that our accounts have to be transparent and available to the public, available to anybody who asks to see them, regardless of whether they're in the church congregation. So if I have a treasurer saying to me, they don't want us seeing their accounts, that's a red flag. That is frankly a red flag. What is it that this person is trying to hide? These are not your accounts. These are charitable accounts. Sardis. Revelation 3:2. Wake up, strengthen what remains and is about to die. For I have found your deeds unfinished in the sight of God. Time to roll up our sleeves. Now, before everybody gets worked up about what I mean by that, I'm not suggesting that we're not working hard, that we are not actually putting our backs into it. Although there are many who aren't. Let's be absolutely candid about this. There are many who aren't. But there are many who are working really hard, but seem to be swimming against the tide. And we hear things like, well, we can't raise the ministry share. You see, we're competing against the Cubs and Rotary and the local rugby club, and they're all doing their local fundraising, and we're just another one. When I was training young officers many years ago, when I was with the Wales University Officer Training Corps, we used to have a way of training them to deal with problems in the tactical environment. And every time they flagged up an issue, we were telling them, you ask, so what? That is the question, so what? So we are competing against X, Y, and Z. So what? Well, the so what there is that we need to be a meaningful organisation in the community that people are happy to engage with and support. So what is our unique selling proposition? What do we offer? And if we're not offering anything, then we need to look at that. We need to look at that very carefully. People have no money. People have no money. Well, so what? If people have no money, so what? Have they got no money, or is it the case that they just need to rethink the way they're spending their money? How much does a cup of coffee cost? You can go into Starbucks today and spend anything like about £3 or £4 on a cup of coffee. And yet they're perfectly happy to come to church on a Sunday and put £2 on the plate. And it's half a cup of coffee. People just need to remember that everything they have comes of God. We don't own anything. The clothes we stand up in are here for our use while we're here on earth. We don't take them with us when we die. If we were owners of it, we would own these items in perpetuity, but we don't. The reason we have earned the money over the years to have nice things is because we've deployed the skills and the talents that God has given us. And even if we've inherited our money, then that money has been built up using the skills and talents God has given other people. Whichever way you cut it, if God is the creator of the universe, then every thread we wear, every coin in our pocket, every crumb on our tables can be traced back to God. And we acknowledge that every Thanksgiving. We tried and it didn't work. So what? So what is arising out of that? Could you do something different? Did you market it properly? Would it work if you tweaked it in some way? If it didn't work, then what else might work? What we tend to do is to say, well, it didn't work, and we sit on our hands, shrug our shoulders, and look sorry for ourselves. That's not the way to do it. If something doesn't work, then analyse why it didn't work and what could be done differently. We're all getting older. Well, yeah, we are all getting older, myself included. And sometimes you do get congregations who have a real problem with having people who are fit enough to go out and do fundraising. But there are other ways of doing it. You can either raise this as an issue at LMA level, and LMAs might be able to help with resources. LMAs might be able to get people from neighbouring churches to come along and run your coffee morning for you. Remember, we are Christians, we're part of a Christian family, and this is what we should be doing, working together as Christians, because we are raising money to fund God's mission. It's not about helping that church, it's about helping our diocese. Philadelphia. Revelation 3:8. Where is the Spirit of God at work? When we think about God's mission, we think about the Missio Dei, God's mission in the world. It's not our mission, it's not the church's mission, it is God's mission. And so we need to look around and see where God is at work, and that's where we put our resources. We getting behind Him. My brother used to work for the police accident investigation team in Dyfed-Powys, and he was an investigator, and he used to tell me, Jeff, we die on the roads we know. We die on the roads we know. We know the straights, we know the bends, we know how sharp they are, we know where the dips are, and that helps us to travel a bit faster because I know the road. I know the road. I can take this little shortcut here, or whatever it is, or I can take this racing line around this bend. And that's the problem. It's the familiarity that causes us to make the mistakes which could end up killing us. So how well do we understand our communities, and how well do we understand our congregations? Have we ever, for instance, taken time out to do a SWOT analysis? SWOT analysis is to analyse the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats that are presented to us by our environment. It's understanding our environment. Yes, it's management speak. And yes, I have borrowed it from management thinking. And no, we are not a business. But we shouldn't be so arrogant as to think that we can't learn from other disciplines. Because actually this is about understanding our context, not about running a business. And understanding our context is essential for running a business, but I would submit that understanding our context is equally essential for ministry. So what about the SWOT analysis? It's something everybody can chip in with post-it notes. Write down 10 strengths, write down 10 weaknesses, write down 10 opportunities, 10 threats, and then we share as a group. And people will come up with things that you haven't thought of. And particularly with the opportunities and the strengths, play to them. And how can we minimise the threats or bolster up our weaknesses? Again, understand our context. Steep, this is another one, borrowed from management. But we need to understand the sociological, the technological, the environmental, the economic, and the political arena we operate in. And we need time out to think about those things. So what? This is the question every time. Select and maintain your aim. And whenever you come up against difficulties or identify a problem, it's not, there we are, walk away. It's, so what? What do we do about this? Where do we go from here? Laodicea. Revelation 3:14-22. Don't become lukewarm about God's way of life. This lukewarmness is something which permeates through the previous 5 points that I've made. This is where we become lukewarm about things. We shrug our shoulders and walk off and say, well, there we are. That's how life is. There's nothing that can be done about it. Well, there we are. That's the opinion they hold. There's nothing I can do about it. Well, there we are. Those are the views that are being expressed. There's nothing I can do about it. Well, if you shrug your shoulders and walk off, there is nothing you can do about it. But as a leader, you need to remain and you need to challenge these views. Don't be lukewarm. In the Church of England daily prayer, There comes a prayer at the beginning which says, "As we rejoice in the gift of this new day, so may the light of your presence, O God, set our hearts on fire with love for you now and forever." Our love for him is demonstrated in getting involved in his mission in the world, bringing his kingdom into the world. And that involves being on fire with love for him. So don't be lukewarm. And so here we are. We're back again to the 6 churches. Now, what have these 6 churches got in common? I'll tell you, they're all in ruins. They're all in ruins. But even though they're all in ruins, these are not failed churches. All churches are built by human beings. They are built because the Spirit of God moves us to build them. And we are moved to build them for a purpose, for a mission. But just as communities around the pit heads form because a pit has opened and there is work and people come in for the work, so when that pit closes, there is no work. And the community either moves on, as it originally moved in, albeit several generations before, or it dies slowly and in a very undignified way. These are churches which completed their mission. The mission for which they were built was achieved. Indeed, we're still learning from these churches through Scripture the lessons that were laid down for us. But they completed their mission. And sometimes we have to accept that a church that was built for very, very good reasons is now in a place where those reasons don't apply anymore. And we need to be grown up about that. We need to come together prayerfully and see how we can move forward into the future and accommodate the worshipping communities that are currently in those church buildings, but which, sadly, have come to the end of their mission. And let's rejoice in a successful mission and a dignified closure, if that is what it takes. And that will be dictated by where God is working at the moment. Where are his energies being poured into, and where should we be putting our resources? So that's it. 4 years as a Sazo, that's the way I see it. Just my approach to my own congregations. You can take it or not. That's a matter for you. But thanks for listening.